Hey everyone, good morning. This is Joe Pacella at Chaikin Analytics, and we're here for the pre-market webinar for Tuesday, November 7th. We are going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes going through Chaikin Analytics with an eye on the overall market. Specifically, we are going to address the XLE. I know Mark Chaikin singled this out in his newsletter. Pretty interesting. A number of interesting observations about that, especially given that energy has not really been one of those groups that's been on our radar as a bullish sector, although it's certainly showing signs of a turnaround. So we're going to go ahead and go through some of the details that Mark addressed in his newsletter, but of course that will only follow the overall market analysis that we typically provide on this session. So as usual, if you have any questions, go ahead and chat those in using the Q&A window. You can type in your questions at any point, anything on your mind, feel free to go ahead and address that. And of course, the session is being recorded. Hopefully, we won't get booted out from the session as we did yesterday during the open forum session. I know there was a bit of an odd, it wasn't an internet outage, but rather I think just my application that I was using on the program crashed, which does happen every now and then. But and bear with me for just one moment here. I'm going to refresh my audio settings. All right. And if you don't mind, take a moment. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Just want to be sure before we actually get started. If you go ahead and chat into the Q&A window, just type in the word yes if the audio sounds clear for you. All right, great. Good. A lot of yeses right off the bat. All right, good. We can get started. All right, everyone. So first things first, before we jump into the XLE, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the SPY. And for the overall market, my message from last week was predominantly, just more of the same. The overall market just kind of heading in a continued growth pattern. And that message continues to ring true today. Power bar still in good shape, more bulls than bears. Performance as a whole, we're well above that long-term trend, and we're certainly in that upper Keltner channel here, which I'll trace over. I know the screen looks kind of small, and you might not be sure if the green bars are actually on the upper volatility band or not. It looks like you're pretty close to it, but you're not riding it. Again, you're kind of splitting hairs in that conversation. The main observation for me when I look at the SPY is that you're still in that upper channel, and that's really the important thing when you're looking at the SPY. So way more stocks as a whole in the overall market are in better shape than there are bears, and stocks obviously with a greater potential to deteriorate. So I like what I'm seeing there. Chaikin money flow, of course. I know it's almost tempting to just look at money flow here and see that you've had a great buildup, but don't lose sight of how long it has been. Not only has it been positive for, but it has been this consistently strong for. That is a really, really impressive trend that has developed. And again, the only kind of period of time that I could rival that against would be back at the beginning of 2017. So you're in absolutely fantastic shape right now. And I know this alone will not prevent you from asking the question of how much longer can the market keep this up. Well, the only possible thing to point to from a timing standpoint, and I don't believe it has that great of influence when we really talk about the overall market here, but overbought, oversold, obviously you need to keep an eye on this from a short-term perspective. Remember, this is purely about timing. So this isn't something that I'm going to use. I wouldn't associate it. You can see I'm intentionally using a different color font when I highlight overbought, oversold. It's because I want you to think about it differently. Whenever I highlight things here in white at the top of the page, as I am this morning, this is what I'm using to determine, again, what is the forward growth potential, right, over the intermediate or longer term. When we talk several months at a time, what is the outlook for the market? And again, everything here is clearly favorable for bullish behavior. The only thing from a short term, which again, I should say, when you draw a conclusion about the great growth potential of the overall market, then you shift your conversation over to timing. So if I see that all these bullish factors are so strong, does that mean I should buy something today? Well, that's not always, in fact, that's not usually the scenario. So rather, to answer that question, should you buy something today? That is when you reference something like overbought, oversold. And when you look at overbought, oversold in its channel here, you're you are literally in an oversold position here, but clearly you're pretty close to getting to the overbought level, right? So think about this from a timing perspective, especially for those of you who are doing more shorter term trading. If you're looking for an opportunity to buy a call on, for example, obviously you're getting pretty close to the point where the market is almost overbought, and therefore most stocks will also likely be overbought pretty soon. So you're running out of time from a very short term perspective. But again, something like this will really, really help you. Remember, we're not here just to help you find winning trades, but we're also going to try to keep you out of losing trades. So again, when you roll the dice on an oversold position that's this far along in its move, and you look for bullish stocks that are, again, you're expecting some short-term momentum, just know that the time is running out for the time being. But of course, the overall market and most individual stocks typically become overbought or oversold within a matter of 1 to 3 weeks. So again, it won't be too long. But anyways, the overall market's still in wonderful shape. And so again, for the most part, you're just seeing continued growth. This opens up the conversation, of course, of our sectors. How is the strength of the market distributed? If I go to the overall sectors here again, the main groups that, of course, would initially get your attention would include financials, healthcare, technology. These are the 3 main groups that we've been speaking about. Even the material sector here, I dedicated some time to last week as a group that's going through a personality change. Let me quickly address technology and materials here, because I think there's some interesting stories there. And then I'm going to jump into energy. So for technology, of course, this is the group that has been leading pretty much the whole way here. This is about as close to a classic bull for a sector as I think you're ever going to find in Chaikin Analytics. When you look at the tech sector, again, this pattern of higher highs and higher lows is very clearly intact. And I really want to highlight the fact that we are looking at a sector right now. We're not looking at a classic bull stock. Obviously, stocks have greater, more aggressive growth potential compared to an ETF, like a sector ETF here. Typically, these sector ETFs are slower moving, and again, lower risk, but also lower reward typically. The point here, though, is that when you look at this chart, you typically don't see a sector that has experienced this consistent and this strong of growth. I don't think if you look through any of these other sectors, you would find something that comes even close to technology. So I want to single this out as a group that, yes, has been doing extraordinarily well, but it is showing all signs that suggest that its growth is likely to continue. So just a wonderful overall trend of higher highs and higher lows for the market. Again, just looking at that technical pattern, it hasn't been without its hiccups, but the recovery of those hiccups, I think, is quite impressive. Chaikin money flow, of course, overwhelmingly positive. Relative strength, which we can reference for these sectors, has been just, again, very, very strong and consistent, outpacing the overall market. Again, the only thing that you want to pay close attention to is, like the SPY, this sector is knocking on the door of being overbought. So therefore, from a short-term bullish perspective, I may want to hold off on my positions. So, but again, technology, when it comes to qualifying the overall sector, it is right up there with the best, if not the overall best sector out there. From the other end of the chart, I guess you could say, is a group like materials, which again, I singled out last week and it's still holding pretty well. Again, it's only been 1 week, so not a significant period of time. But when you look at the sector here, this is a group, as I pointed out last week, just doesn't have that many stocks in it. Therefore, with a lower headcount of stocks, the power bar is going to be a little bit more volatile, generally speaking. You only have 6 bullish rated stocks compared to 3. So again, the numbers are not even close to what technology was. With that in mind, though, you can see that it's still a beneficial, it's still more bullish ratio. So let's at least take the time to look at the charts here. And when you look at the charts, you can see a pretty consistent story. So you have a group breaking out of its growth pattern out into above the upper band, and again, in that channel, which is great. When you look at Chaikin money flow, again, really nice buildup. It has tailed off a bit as of late, but again, I'm willing to give it some time before I, completely get turned away based on money flow. Overbought, oversold has been in an awkward pattern, so we've been avoiding it from a timing standpoint. but it's almost down there in that oversold position. It's interesting how prolonged of a move it's been lately, but we'll see how that plays out. And relative strength here is what really makes this group interesting, is the fact that you've gone through a personality change, gone from underperforming to now outperforming. Again, just like money flow, it has tailed off a little bit, but the fact that you're seeing the sector break out as it has since this September timeframe, again, it are all of the signs that we typically look for in a personality change. So materials is a group worth keeping your eye out for. In the interest of time, again, I want to highlight healthcare as a group that's been in need of a bit of recovery. Financials, though, kind of similar to, in fact, better than materials, going through a very nice personality change itself. So keep your eye out on those two groups as well. Think of them, I guess, as honorable mention for today's session. But I want to jump in energy because I want to be very, very careful about how we address technology, or pardon me, energy, excuse me. So for energy, this has been a group that we've constantly referred to as, and I'm going to go to the 5-year chart, as a hotbed for shorting opportunities, a group that's really gone through a lot of pain lately, and you've kind of had a head fake for what it had gone through in 2016. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that I'm sure all of you have read this by now, but if you haven't already, Mark Chaikin highlighted the energy group for a number of reasons, and a number of reasons that you can't exactly see in Chaikin Analytics. Now, I'm going to skip down to the section because you absolutely will want to comb through every detail that Mark provides regarding energy, simply because without his observations here, I'm going to just skip right down. It's difficult because when it comes to energy, there's always a lot of speculation regarding, obviously, the price of oil, price of crude, number of other factors. And I know that's not exactly front and center on our platform. So Mark's commentary about this sector really goes hand in hand with how you will manage any positions that you're thinking about in the XLE. In this group, obviously, let's see, there's a reference here to price of crude, natural gas. XLE is looking more buyable. So let's address this here because I think that's the easiest to point out. Now, in the power bar, on the surface, this is not a very impressive power bar, right? You're only looking at 4 bulls and 4 bears. And like materials, there's just not many stocks in that group. With that said, this is a group that typically has had 0 bulls and anywhere from, I'll just round it at 15 bears. So for something like the SPY, what I've usually said about the SPY is that if you're looking for a sign for when that group may begin to slow down, it would be more when you see an evening out of the power bar, right? When you see fewer bulls and more bears appear. And you could say that type of trend is also true here with the XLE, where you've gone from a significant number of bears to an evening out, 4 bulls and 4 bears. Again, not a significant, not an overwhelmingly significant number here, but the fact of the matter is that you are looking at fewer bears and more bulls. So that's the first sign that you can point to. And I'll also point to, sticking with the 5-year chart here, if you look at the technical trend, again, going back to what Mark mentioned, signs of a turnaround, you can clearly look at the price of the XLE going above the long-term trend. Now, back here at this point, we were not going through a similar trend. You were looking at, again, still more bears than bulls, despite the market breaking above the long-term trend. The fact, though, that the sector has sustained itself, let me go to the 1-year chart. The fact that the sector sustained itself above the long-term trend and is now, or at least has moved from an oversold to overbought position here, you're seeing the establishment of higher lows and higher highs here. And that is exactly what Mark is referencing when you talk about a sector that is looking more buyable. A number of domestic large and small cap oil stocks have seen their power gauge ratings turn bullish. They joined a very strong international oil stocks with bullish ratings in the integrated oil group. So you have, again, a pretty good trend for the overall sector. And of course, by the way, money flow. I know right now it's not overwhelmingly impressive, but when you compare that to the rest of the year, the story is a lot different. And of course, by the way, when we talk about a personality change, clearly you can see for relative strength, it's turning around. So a really, really strong move here. So you have a lot of things to point to here. The one thing is the one thing I want to be very careful about though is that when you look at the power bar, clearly it has gone through improvement. And I really want to emphasize, which I know it's not front and center here, but the fact that you have seen fewer bears develop and you're seeing more and more bulls develop. Now, when it comes to screening, typically in this case, usually once we identify the group that's going through a potential turnaround, the dialogue usually switches to, well, how can I find these energy stocks? Well, luckily, we're not looking at too many. If you're wondering which ones to keep an eye out for, well, here are the bullish ones. There's only 4. DVN, MPC, PSX, and VLO. And I believe since Mark wrote this article, one more of them has turned bullish. Now, for more information about those energy stocks, if you scroll down on Mark's article, you can find, where is it? If you look really close, Mark highlighted these energy stocks as bullish stocks of the week. So stocks to buy on pullbacks. Now, let's start with MPC, DVN, and PSX. We'll start with MPC here because, I'm going to spend some time emphasizing what it means to, of course, buy on a pullback. Now, those instructions should be very clear-cut. When you look at a stock like MPC, first, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stick with that white font with my drawing tools just to highlight why this is a stock we're interested in. Now, clearly, this stock has gone through a bit of a turnaround, right? Before this point, we were bearish and neutral, but look at what's changing here. You have a bullish rating now for the first time in a while. It's a pretty good sign. And it's establishing reinforced confidence when you look at something like relative strength, right? And I know relative strength went positive before we were bullish, but clearly that's improving here. Now, obviously, up here at the chart, we are above the long-term trend. You're in your upper channel. All of that looks well and good. So looking at those factors, and money flow isn't the greatest trend you've seen. But when I have all 3 of these lining up and money flow, which has improved at least over the past few months, I can live with that. Now I'm going to switch font to timing. Now Mark says wait for a pullback, right? Well, clearly the stock reported earnings about a week ago, and it's really gapped up significantly. You're well above that upper band. Not only are you spending most of your time in that upper channel, but you're above it at this point. So clearly, one of your first thoughts, and I know this is usually one of the comments that a lot of people point out is, the fact that the stock's well above that point, should I wait for a pullback? And clearly, those are Mark's instructions. On top of that, it's easy to see that the stock is in an overbought position. So between those 2 factors here, it's pretty clear that you're going to want to give it some time. Overbought and kind of let it breathe, let it pull back a little bit. So instead of just kind of immediately jumping into energy, think about it from timing. That's probably going to be today's lesson. So think about that for MPC. I think it's pretty easy to see in that case. Let's jump to DVN. So also in this group, which had a great day yesterday, but again, that doesn't mean it's going to be sustained. And again, for a lot of the same reasons, you can see the stock going from neutral to bullish, relative strength negative to positive, money flow. Again, look at money flow over several months. You can clearly see that there's been an improvement. Like the sector, it pulled up above the long-term trend, pulled back but stayed above that point, and now here you are well above the upper channel. So again, good signs, but it's just a question of timing at this point. Notice how you're above the upper band and you're overbought. So again, clearly indications that I want to give it some time. And finally, the last one that I have here, PSX. Let's look at PSX. Again, it's clear reasons. You can see the stock had already broken out very well here. But again, for timing, overbought, really gapped up here sharply. So you get the idea. So you have a couple of great stocks to keep an eye out for. And again, I'm going to proceed with this cautiously. Obviously, when Mark dedicates a lot of time and analysis to a sector like this, which is kind of eye-catching, we were kind of surprised. Some of us here in the office, but it makes sense. There's a reason why Mark Chaikin writes the newsletters. But yeah, for something like energy, which we've dedicated so much bearish content today, or pardon me, over the past couple of years, it's kind of interesting to see that the group is now being spoken about more in bullish terms. So All right, with that in mind, I'm going to take a look at the Q&A window. If you have any questions, go ahead and chat them in, and we'll go from there. Let's see. A question regarding the open forum. Yeah, I need to take a look at the recording. I'm a little concerned because of the outage. So I'm going to see what kind of condition the recording is in. But I may have to record a placeholder for that. But just jump to the webinars link here, and I'll have it posted hopefully within an hour. Let's see. One of my clients has owned T for years. He's concerned about its direction. How do I use Chaikin to help him decide whether to sell now or hold? Actually, let me hold off on that question. I'm going to jump to some of the energy stocks here, or energy questions first. Joe, is energy a sector that can be more influenced by geopolitical events than most? Of course, earnings are important, but OPEC and Middle East factors can move prices quickly. I'm sure it can be, but it's tough to say because events like that, OPEC and Middle East factors, those are not things that we can track very easily in Chaikin Analytics, so it's difficult to follow. With that said, that's a slippery slope into highly speculative decision making, and you know my policy on speculation. So I think if it was that great of a concern, Dave, it would have been addressed in these newsletters here, or at least in Mark's commentary. So again, it's kind of a little bit of a one more reason to really reinforce before you do anything with energy, read through this newsletter as closely as you can. Read through every single detail that Mark has to say about energy before making a move. Let's see, and I think that let's see. The comment here. I'm looking at the 3 oil stocks, only looking for a 2 to 3 point pullback. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, if that's your perspective, yeah, that's fine. Again, I would just really caution to use overbought, oversold with that. All right, let me go back to the comment here about AT&T. So you've been holding it for a long time, trying to figure out what to do with it for now. Yeah, if you've been holding it for a long time, then you're probably staring down capital gains considerations. So the 5-year chart's going to teach you a thing or two. If you've had it for a long time, then hopefully your cost basis is greater than 31 or so, because clearly I'm going to say this very cautiously, but you're only losing this growth. So I don't know what AT&T did 5 years prior to this, but the interesting thing is the dividend here. You're getting nearly 6% dividend, so you have to balance that as well. The outlook certainly is not good, right? And I know there's speculation about, so let's see, I believe AT&T and DirecTV are both combined, and so just concerned about viewership across the board. And so that's not boding very well. It's the same reasons that's been lagging Disney down. With all of that in mind here, I know the stock has a neutral positive rating, but aside from that, though, you have a lot of reasons to be worried. Money flow, not only as of recent, but really for the entirety of the past year. Relative strength is not good. The power gauge rating briefly was bullish while the stock was above the long-term trend, but obviously that did not bode well leading into earnings. And ultimately, you're finding a new 12-month low. So the outlook is not good. You have some things to balance, again, longer-term interest since you've been in the stock for so long, and plus you have a pretty strong dividend here. So, but we can tell you from a growth perspective, the picture is not looking good. Let's see. When you refer to a personality change in financials, I'm not clear of what you meant by that. Let's take a look. So personality change may not be the appropriate phrase, to be fair. I think more of like a extended recovery is probably a better way to describe it. So what I was referring to, yeah, it's definitely the personality change. I'm sorry, was not the right terminology I should have used. But rather, I was just indicating that financials had broken out of its range here. And again, what it has in common, pretty much everything I'm highlighting here. So, I mean, I know overbought, oversold is what it is, but the fact that this sector broke out above its resistance point was really the main thing that I was trying to point out. Let's see, request here for RDN. Let's take a look. Radian, great shape. Yeah, a lot of great signs. Yeah, pretty easy to see. This is a wonderful stock here, and you can see it's leading into an oversold position. Just be mindful of and by the way, great example of a pullback here. But just keep an eye out for the SPY, just because it's almost overbought. But the stock itself here, Radian, is in great shape. Let's see, SCWX. Let's see, SecureWorks. Computer security, very, very small cap stock. I know cybersecurity is such a hot topic, but um, tell me what cybersecurity is actually working. Um, when you look at the stock here, it seems to be a relatively new stock. Um, it recently, I guess it looks like it recently IPO'd. And let me see, let me go to the 1 year. So I don't know, I'm not seeing anything impressive at all here. Seems to kind of be in a weird range. It's borderline of, it's flirting with microcap status. It's at 780 million. Money flow is not good. Relative strength isn't good. The power gauge rating recently turned neutral. So this is a decision purely about speculation. Comment on Gilead. Let's see. All right. Gilead. I know pharma and biotech have been really lagging lately. Gilead here, yeah, just kind of. I know this. I believe it was at this one or another one was highlighted as a stock of the week I guess about a month ago or so. Clearly, these now actually we've been addressing these in our webinars lately. Obviously, it's in trouble. The signs of a turnaround are clearly there. At least not an exit sign to be more clear. Yeah, just this is a tough one. I know it had gone through great growth here, but clearly I don't know what's caused the stock to gap down so hard. Aside from the overall sector seems to be experiencing that, but yeah, the picture here is not good. There's very little reason to expect a turnaround. There's a comment here: is energy reserved for refiners and not drillers? I'm not sure about that, but I would point you to the industries group to kind of distinguish. What you can do is, by the way, Mark highlighted the oil integrated sector here. If you want to take a look at this group, which has 12 bulls and 0 bears, you'll find that right at the top of the page. But something you can do is just simply reorganize this list alphabetically, and you would have an easier time finding some energy stocks. In fact, oil specifically down here, if you're looking for distinctions, you can use these industry groups for separating, refiners versus drillers or anything along those lines. Can you take a look at the XLE again? I want to see one filtered stock listed at the bottom of the list. Yeah, sure. Let's go to XLE. Actually, no, I need to pull up the sector itself. You mentioned there was one that was filtered out. And again, it's all based on my global filter, CHK, Chesapeake, I think. Yeah, that's all. You're welcome, Henry. And last three here, let's take a look at Twitter. Interesting. I think there was a request for Twitter last night, so I wonder why that's getting some attention. It actually hasn't done too bad lately. Wow. Maybe because tech overall is doing well. This is a stock that's usually had a bullish rating, and I've kind of had to apologize for Twitter a number of times just because it's been so violent with its volatility. So I guess you could say I shouldn't be stating this, but I'm kind of snake-bitten when it comes to Twitter, just because it has been extraordinarily volatile. You can take a look at all those gapping events. So if you're going to go with Twitter, and I know it's bullish, and I know its relative strength is positive, and money flow is good here, but I would definitely recommend proceeding with caution. VMW. This one came up on my screen lately. Let's see, VMware. Just a great example. I don't there's a whole lot to add to this one. Just checks off every box. It's price trend, money flow, it's even oversold, it's relative strength, it's bullish power gauge rating. Yeah, this is an easy one. And then ANET. ANET very similar. Obviously, the power gauge rating is not bullish, but if you rely on the technicals here, you can obviously do very well. It's holding up very well above its long-term trend. That would be the one, if you're in a stock like ANET, or if you're wondering, what would be the sign of a turnaround, watch for what it does versus that long-term trend line. Watch money flow. I know it's breaking up a little bit, but it's still, I would say, more positive. Relative strength is still excellent, and just make sure the stock doesn't turn bearish on you. And the question here, overbought or sold, does the individual stock overbought or sold have to be in sync with the S&P before you put on the trade? It doesn't have to be, but the closer you are, the more consistent of a move you can expect. Pretty much the closer you are to the market, and this is going to sound obvious, the closer a stock's overbought or sold is to the SPY, the lower likelihood of a conflict with the overall market. The whole thought process just simply, it has to do with avoiding fighting an uphill battle, where if you're dealing with an oversold stock like Radian was, when the SPY is closer to being overbought, it's just going to make it's one thing that's going to make the stock's growth potential more difficult to occur. So that's the whole thought process with syncing up very closely with the market. And last question here, regarding the drawing tools, I'm using the drawing tools of the webinar program that I'm using. So I know I'm able to draw through everything here, but that's not actually a direct function of Chaikin. It's just something that I'm using within the webinar program. So, and one more just came in here. Roaming around the Chaikin signals, money flow buys for JP. Are institutions doing something? As a whole, I mean, I would have to say, generally speaking, absolutely they are. And again, that goes right back to money flow. So when you look at money flow for the SPY, I would have to say absolutely are institutions doing something? Yes, they're buying like crazy. So yeah, just purely based on money flow for the SPY, I would say so. You mentioned JP. I don't know if you mean actually JP or JP Morgan, but I guess let's take a look. JP Holdings. Yeah, within the stock itself, clearly something's going on here. It is a very small cap stock, which is interesting. But again, that's kind of the volatility that you would expect here. Yeah, it just depends on if you think this 1 to 3 month trend here will be sustained. It's extraordinary growth, obviously, but I would definitely want to learn more about why the stock all of a sudden caught the attention of institutions. So, all right. And regarding update, is Chaikin updated at 9 or 9:30 a.m.? It's actually updated overnight, so closer to like midnight. And the money flow buy signal, if you want to learn more about money flow buys or any of the other signals, check out the user guide. You'll find definitions for each one of those. And you can actually read through. It's pretty much just a trend of obviously money flow itself, but also what it's doing versus the short-term trend line and having a bullish power gauge rating. But you can see more details about that in the user guide. All right, I'm going to leave it there for now. I'm going to go ahead. I have a few recordings to post here, so check out the webinars link for more information. If you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. Click on the question mark icon. You can always chat in. But until then, have a great day, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock for the options session.